it's good to be able to speak English once again, and we're having an American and English version of the Snowmobile podcast here in Sweden. Here with us on Motorsport Idag podcast, Andrew Lindholm. Welcome back to Motorsport Idag podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I just had an interview, as I said, with you over social media with another Swedish rider, and there's a lot of excitement, I feel, now as the season are sort of coming to a start and the teams are start moving and preparing for the upcoming season. So please brief us on what's going on in your life at the moment.
Well, getting closer to the season for me means cutting back on the 9-to-5 job and doing more training and just getting ready. So working with a new team, like I mentioned to you earlier, and so getting everything sorted out with them and lining everything up for the season. So a lot of riding and just getting ready.
Wow, it has to feel nice to sort of feel that the excitement and everything is starting to sort of come alive once again. And is there anything with this new team that you feel has been a challenge for you, or have you been able to sort of adapt in a very quick way?
You know, everything so far has been great. They're like a family to me already, and very easy to work with and really open to any suggestions that I have or things that I've done a certain way. And so far I've absolutely about as easy and seamless as it could be.
All right. Well, then I have to say congratulations, because that is a big vital part in being able to be prepared for what's coming. If you sort of being able to sort of feel at home in a new environment with new people and with a new headquarters, etc., etc. A lot of variables that has to sort of link together for you to get ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And for myself, I've figured out, as a racer, you learn a little bit about yourself and what helps you perform well. And for me, it's a lot of it is comfort. And a high pressure situation for me usually doesn't work best. I put out everything I have, and high pressure just makes me ride over my head and crash and have more problems. So I think we'll get along really well in that aspect as well. Everything that I've seen so far, I think it's going to be a really good fit.
Yeah, you start sounding a little bit like Fernando Alonso when he moved to McLaren. You start seeing small bits and pieces that you think is going to help you. So you're not thinking it's going to become a McLaren Honda type of situation?
I just, I'm not real familiar with that situation, so I can't say. I'm sorry, but I think it's going to be good here.
Chaos, but
sure.
No, but that's good. Okay. But with that said,
I don't think so.
As we talked with Marcus earlier here, he mentioned a little bit about the way he sets up his sled to perform in the best way, and he has the original KYB in the rear skid, and he has Fox Evolve X in the two front skids and the A arms. For you, when it comes to the shock absorbers and the way they sort of handle and perform and the character of them, is that something that is important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Having good suspension is a major key. For myself, I've really liked Fox over the years. When I've ridden Polaris and ridden Skidoo, and now have more of a home on Arctic Cat, and I've used Fox pretty much the entire time and have worked really well with them and been able to find something I'm comfortable with.
All right. And also, it's interesting, first of all, to hear you say that, but it's also interesting to look at the Arctic Cat. Arctic Cat has always had, pretty big sleds in comparison to, now I'm talking design-wise. Is that something that you feel, sort of, that it is a bigger sled when you compare to the Polaris, like the IQ chassis, and now with the new chassis that's coming, and in comparison to the Skidoo? Is it easy to adapt for you to the Arctic Cat?
It was pretty easy for me last year coming in on the Arctic Cat. I find that it needs the panels are a little bit wider, and that is definitely something that I noticed. But I did also notice that the sled seems to require less body English to get it to do what you want it to do. So you don't need to move around quite as much, and it makes it really not much of an issue at all. The fact that it's a little bit wider and a little bit bigger of a sled.
And that, a lot of people that I've talked to within this world, of course, of racing has sort of been in a little bit in the same line as you, as although they are drastically sort of different, but also the level of snowmobiles today in the race category is so high that
Yeah.
it gets easy to adapt anyways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all of the sleds are really good. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, well, as with a car, you can't even buy a bad car today. Even the level is so high, although it's all about taste, so to speak. Let's just and not forget the elephant in the room, which is, of course, that now it's gonna be a big change. Pro Open tuning is gonna sort of disappear over there in America, and I talked with Marcus about that, and he had his view on it. As a Swedish rider, and you being in America, being able to sort of, when you race at least, what's your view on that, and do you think it's going to have any significant effect?
It definitely is an elephant in the room, no doubt about that. I'm certainly going to miss having the mod sleds at the races. There's nothing quite like those twin pipes and that crisp sound, and it definitely gets people excited. I hope it doesn't have a negative impact on our level of spectators and people coming out to the races. I see what they're trying to do as far as reducing the cost. To me, that's a little bit barking up the wrong tree, because I don't think there's anyone that has the skill and the talent to race pro open that isn't doing it because they can't afford the sled. I just don't think that's where we need to go with it. With that being said, we'll see what happens. As of now, I don't know of anybody new really being added to the class. Hopefully the racing's good and we're able to still have a good series and keep the excitement level high.
Well, that's exactly what we were looking for, and that's why we asked that question, because let's face it first of all affects you guys over there, because over here we still have the Pro Open, we have the, as you said, the twin pipes and a lot of noise from the sleds. Of course that's going to be a change. It was the same thing in Formula One and other series. As you start doing the downsizing and less tuning of this, the sound changes and a lot of that. So in that respect, it's pretty similar. But as you said, now it's gonna have an effect. But let's sort of have an open mind about it and make the best out of the situation. Or how do you view on it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's how I looked at it. Is I'm bummed about it, but for me personally, it doesn't affect my racing. For the coming season, being in Pro Light. And in a way, I'm a little bit of a benefactor, because I think it pushed Arctic Cat and pushed some of the manufacturers to really make sure that their stock sled is as good as it can possibly be, which, not to say they weren't really good before, but I think it's going to push our development a little bit more. So that part I'm excited about, because it'll guarantee that we are on a really, really good sled. But yeah, I did get the chance to race a mod sled at Lake Geneva at the finale last year, and that was a really fun experience, and the sound and everything involved was just incredible. And so it is definitely a bummer to know that that's not going to be an option in the future.
We look at it pretty similar in that way, and things change, and it's going to be something that you have to adapt to, but I don't think it's going to be something, as you said, that's going to significantly change the racing itself, hopefully. But it's interesting to sort of get into that and listen a little bit about how riders sort of resonate around it. And moving on from that, what would you say is the main reason for this change?
From what I understand, the biggest reason is the lack of participation in the Pro Open class here. We got down to, there was a few races, I think, where there were only 13 riders in the pro class. So we didn't even have a full gate, if you will. So I think the idea was reduce the cost and hopefully increase participation, because we had probably, at the first race at Duluth, I think we had almost 50 riders in Pro Light, and consistently it was 30 to 40 riders every weekend. So I think the idea was to get a few riders to bump up and make sure we've got a full gate all the time in the Pro Open class. Was at least part of it.
Okay, or that sort of, when I've heard it before, I've sort of understand that sort of kind of was the whole point of it. Sort of analyzing that a little bit further before we're moving on. do you think it will have effect? Do you sort of when you sort of sit down and sort of resonate and sort of with yourself around the situation, do you think it's going to have an effect in the long term?
To me, I don't really think it will, because um, most guys would rather win a pro light race than be a 5th to 10th place guy in pro open. So to get people to move up, I think really what it would come down to more so is stricter rules as far as bumping people out of pro light, or either that or dumping more money into pro open. You know, there has to be some reason for riders to move up. So to me, I don't think that this moving to the stock sled alone is really going to make any difference as far as participation in that class.
Okay, it's great to hear, because a lot of riders have different views on it, and it's really interesting to hear, because I really value your view on it for sure. So that's interesting to hear. With that said, you talked about Duluth, and that's your season opener. Over here in Sweden, our first snowcross competition is called Arctic Cup.
Okay.
So yeah, and with that said, we both have almost the same season openers at almost the same time. So this snowcross season, what is your personal individual goal?
My personal goal is I definitely want to get it on the podium. I think last year my preparation wasn't quite where it needed to be. My sprint speed was really good, but I wasn't able to. I made a lot of mistakes over the course of a final. So my goal is to be able to take my sprint speed, if you will, and be able to do that in an entire final. And I know if I can do that, I'll be competitive to get on podiums and hopefully be have a shot at winning races. Is really where I want to be. Getting into setting myself up for consistently, top 5 in finals and go from there.
That sounds like a very reasonable goal, and at least from what you said in the beginning of the interview, it seems like you're sort of finding every single piece to at least build a very good, solid ground to stand on and build further from. And looking forward throughout as the season progresses, I think those results is realistically achievable, and I understand that that's your ambition, and I really hope that you were able to reach them.
Yeah, thank you. Last season for me was a little bit, I definitely put in quite a bit of work getting ready for it, but I was coming off of 2 years of being injured, and I think I underestimated how far off I was, and I didn't get where I needed to be, and we kind of threw everything together at the last minute. I wasn't even sure I was going to race until probably August last year. I thought I might be done. So we kind of threw everything together and put together a program and ended up being competitive. And so now this year it's like, all right, let's find every piece we can and make a better run at it. And I'm so excited. I can't wait.
Yeah, well, same here. Being able to grow up here, having that sort of privilege of growing up in the northern part of Sweden, where we have a lot of snow. I don't know how much snow we're gonna get this year, but when we have a lot of snowmobiles, we have a lot of dealers here, a lot of wilderness where we can ride, not in the same way as in America, but although in a very way as it is sort of worth. And it really just feels so great when you're able to see the snowcross, be out in the wilderness and just carve away. So it's great to be able to do that. Looking forward with your sort of career as a whole, what drives you, when it comes to progression and training and mental motivation? What is it that drives you to sort of work harder and look at the small details on how to improve? What is it that sort of you feel that this is the reason why I want to work a little bit harder to become a little bit better?
Well, I would say, as a whole, I love what I do. I love racing snowmobiles and I have a great time doing it. It's something where as a little kid, I watched snowcross videos over and over again and finally, ended up convincing my dad, hey, let's go to a race and let me try it. I don't know. I think it's something it's hard to describe to people what drives to do that extra bit of training or that extra bit of riding or that extra preparation. I don't think it's something you can really teach. I think you either have it or you don't. And for me, like I said, I love what I do, and just want to be the best version of myself that I can be. And racing snowmobiles is something that really gives me a lot of gratification, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, well, that's understandable. A lot of the riders that I talk to just talk about exactly what you're describing, how much joy they find in what they're doing. Of course, when you're being able to do what you really like, of course, you find a lot of joy in it, but it feels like it's something about the snowcross industry or snowcross world or whatever that just makes people so motivated and so happy and content within themselves. So for somebody like me that are pretty new to snowcross, in all honesty, when it comes to sort of interviewing and getting deeper into it, if you would speak to somebody that has never been to a race, how would you describe it, and what do you think is the main thing for going to a race?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's a high level of excitement. The fans we have are great. I have some friends. It's funny you ask, because I have some friends who recently, or this past season, came to their first races, and they kind of had some of the same questions and said, you know what, we got to just come out, we'll experience it. And just about everybody who comes to a race, it seems like they're hooked. They love it, they follow it, they watch it online or the TV broadcasts that we get. They're hooked in, and I think a lot of it is just the energy around it. A lot of the snowcross community is like a big family. It's very competitive, but most are willing to drop everything to help each other too, and I think people like that. People enjoy seeing it, and yeah, that's about all I've got.
Well, that's a great answer, man. You're you're a professional at this. That's for sure. So I'm not going to judge that.
Another thing I wanted to mention quick. You mentioned goals for this year. I would really love to come and race the Clash at the end of the year. I'm hoping to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, I really hope you're coming, because not only do you sound like a very nice person, but you also, it seems like you, as I said, you have your goals straight and you work hard to become better. And let's face it, that's exactly what the life is all about. So how to find a way to become a little bit better day by day. So you're more than welcome. Sweden is an open country, and we would love to have you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I hope I can make it happen.
Yeah,
it'd be great to meet all you guys too.
Yeah, and that's a great competition, and it's so great when we get the riders like Tucker Hibbert and all of these huge stars that comes over and being willing to do the Clash. So that's a huge honor. With that said, sort of, you have a very, very long calendar in comparison to maybe as we have here. A big jumps and intense racing, as you already touched on. So how do you set up yourself to be able to do the whole season? And is there anything that you do ritually or on the side to be able to handle a whole snowcross season?
As far as like money wise, or your body holding up, or what in particular?
A little bit of all of it, when it comes to the body, etc.
Yeah. For me, as far as keeping my physical preparation, and a lot of it is, I think a lot of people underestimate what you need as far as recovery. So making sure you take active recovery days after, you get 3-4 hard days of training in a row, and then we go to a national, and then you go back and you're riding right away again. The trainers that I'm working with are really helpful as far as finding things that I need to work on, or that are causing me weakness that will, compound over a season. So that's a big part of it. Just the awareness of it, and taking your off times as you need it, and active recovery, the stretching, and all that little stuff that adds up really makes a big difference. And I still continue to work a little bit outside of racing through the winter for my dad's company, and so that's mostly office work, so that's a little bit of a break from it all too, just to step out a little bit. And then it really makes me appreciate the days I get on my snowmobile too, and I realize that how much better it is than a normal job. So it's all that little stuff keeps you going.
Yeah, that's understandable. And another thing that that I talk to with a lot of riders, but it's good to sort of touch on it at least. Do you feel that it's sort of, I should say maybe easy, but do you feel that the interest is there for companies or organizations or whatever you might be? Do you feel that it is there to support riders, to help them to get through a season or help them with money to survive with their career?
More than I would assume. I've always been the way I was raised. Try not to ask for things unless you need them, I guess. So that's something that I struggle with a little bit myself is just asking for things that you may need, or not even necessarily a need, but something that will help you do better. Whether it's money from companies or parts or whatever it is, and most are a lot more gracious and willing to help than I would assume. So I think overall, yes, it's pretty good, the level of support.
Yeah, well, that's awesome, and I even had, I was a track and field athlete here in Sweden, and even I got a sponsorship from a Snocross dealership called North Machines, basically. So that's a John Deere sort of supplier, and that was sort of why I asked that question, because I was shocked that it's mostly the snowmobile salespeople or companies that want to so support people, and even outside of snowmobiling. And I think that's a very good sign on the philosophy and the attitude sort of towards the sport, and it really paves the way for other riders to be able to sort of find a flotation marks a living in this business.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with that 100%. And it's cool to see, some of the owners of these companies and stuff coming out to the races, and they love it just like we do. So that, I think, is the best part.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the Idag series, shall we? As that is the highest series in the world when it comes to snowcross. Let's face it. And Tucker Hibbert got beaten, so he's not unbeatable. With that said, I guess that's your long-term goal is to be there as a Idag champion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the series that you guys have is incredibly competitive too. So, but I appreciate that you guys consider us to be the premier. I think it's going to be a good season. It'll be fun to see how it is with the pro class being on stock sleds, and seeing how that affects guys like Cody Cam and Tucker and Tremblay. And it'll be interesting. It was tight racing last year, and hopefully it's even tighter this year.
Exactly. This is something that we usually discuss a lot, and now when we sort of touched on the fact that it's going to become stock, do you think the field is going to be a little bit more closer together now when this changes with the Pro Open and tuning in the series?
I do think it'll be a little bit closer. Some of these guys, the development and the things that they do to those mod sleds is absolutely incredible. All you need to do is stand next to the track when Cody Cam goes by, and that sled runs amazing. So to put them back on stock sleds, I think it will tighten things up a little bit. I don't think you'll see I don't think you'll see a 7th place guy go to a podium guy, but hopefully it is a little bit closer.
Yeah, just as you said, in a very great way. Although it's not gonna maybe be a drastic change like you mentioned, although it can make a change in that way where it at least gets a 7th place person closer to a podium, let's say.
Right. Yeah. I think it'll tighten up the packs a little bit. There's definitely some guys in towards the back of that pro class that, as far as their sled, they're struggling. It's a lot harder to make a mod sled run good than it is to make a stock sled run good.
Yeah.
So if it mixes them up a little bit and makes them more competitive, that I think probably would be a good thing for the sport. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I also forgot to ask, has Arctic Cat sort of moved away from carburetors, or are you using fuel injection at the moment?
We are fuel injected. So last year was the first year the stock sleds were fuel injected, and they dabbled with it on the mod sleds too. I don't know what they ran most of the year. I think, in that class they can do either. But our stock sleds last year were fuel injected, and this coming year are fuel injected as well.
Exactly, and I saw that because Skido moved away from from carburetors as well. But let's get a little bit technical, shall we? So for the person that might not know that much about sort of the inner part of the sled, what is the upsides and downsides with carburetors and fuel injection?
Well, fuel injection, I guess you could say, is the future. Cars and everything used to be carbureted, and now just about everything is fuel injection. I think snowmobiles are one of the last things to move to fuel injection. Upsides would be you don't have to rejet or change anything for different temperatures and stuff like that. Theoretically, a fuel injection should run perfect all the time. It shouldn't have any bogs. It shouldn't, you shouldn't have flat spots in the power and stuff like that. So I think as it's developed, and it will be, a whole step ahead of the carburetor. As of right now, it's still, we're still working on it. We've done a lot of mapping changes last year. They're changing some things this year, so we'll see how it goes. But it'll be really, really good once it's perfected.
Yeah, it's usually a pretty big process. Not only the thing when you move away from something and move to something different, but also as it progresses. We see it with the electric cars, let's say. How much that has developed. Let's take the Prius as an example, and to where we are now. What I'm trying to say is it's a process, and it's going to take time. And once that process has reached its end, either you are content with that or you find something else that you want to perfect. The sled you race is Arctic Cat. It's a 600cc, and is it 325, 345 inch track on it?
Oh, it's a 120, or no, we've gone to, it's a longer one now, so it's a 136 inch track, which last year was a 128 inch track.
Yeah. And with that said, now, do you experience any difference? Because the Arctic Cat looks just absolutely like a warrior in especially corners. I've studied that sled now, the new chassis that came 2012 onwards. It just looks so good in corners. Big banks, it just swallows it up so good, and it just looks so smooth. Do you agree, or what's your view on it?
Absolutely. The Arctic Cat is corners absolutely fantastic. And with minimal rider effort, which is great. Lets you focus, get through those corners and then onto the whoop sections or whatever your next obstacle is. So that's definitely a good observation. They corner amazing.
I think what's so amazing with the Arctic, you can really clearly see it. You can see that the other sleds, I'm not trying to throw shadow on them, but it's just something that when some manufacturers just have found sort of the perfect recipe for something, you can just see that some of the other sleds sort of when they came in the corner, it sort of has to stop and sort of have a little second to sort of settle the sled before they go on power and go away from the corner again. And having a sled like the Arctic Cat, which you can sort of drive through the whole corner, like almost like a NASCAR Cup car, in my opinion, on a banking, has to be a huge advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And riding the sled, that's what it feels like too. The first time I rode an Arctic Cat, I was amazed at how well everything worked, and I didn't touch a suspension clicker or change anything, initially, and it just worked really, really well. And that's one thing I think Arctic Cat seems to do better is really listening to the racers and listening to the people riding them, and it's definitely the most ready to race sled out of the box. If you want a sled that you just put gas in and go race, the Arctic Cat, you can't touch it.
No, and as we speak, Arctic Cat, which I love, my first sled was a 580. Man, that old beast, man. That's a real sled, that is.
Yeah, it is.
and as we talked to Arctic Cat, as I mentioned, let's talk heydays. We saw a very different Arctic Cat this year when it comes to the look of it. It looks like the 120cc, but I can imagine that as with every year, and it was every sled, they have sort of find sort of small things that have sort of fine-tuned. Do you know anything that they have sort of changed for this year, or do you think it's going to be any big change from last year's sled to this year's sled?
From what I understand, most of the sled is actually new this year. I believe the race director told me it was like over 450 new parts on the sled. and 20 pounds lighter, which I believe the Cat was already the lightest sled in the class. So I think the sled's going to be really good. I'm pretty good friends with Logan Christian, and he did a lot of the testing and development on this new one, and he said it's going to blow my mind. So I'm really excited to get one on the track.
It has to be a little bit frustrating, but also a buzz waiting for such a great machine coming in and that you can use on the track like a warrior.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see how it goes as far as when we get our sleds and where we'll be able to find snow, but hopefully we can get some good preseason testing in, and I absolutely can't wait.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, is there anything you would say to the Swedish listeners and viewers when it comes to our YouTube channel and Acast and SoundCloud about not only you but also about the American way of racing snowmobile?
I wish I had more of a reference as far as what it's like over there. I hope I can come over and experience, and I'll be able to tell you some of the differences. But I do have a Swedish and Norwegian background on my dad's side of my family, so that's kind of personal to me, and I hope I get to come visit the home country, and thank you all for listening and even being interested in this sport that I love so much.
Yeah, well, I can only say that every time we have you on, as you said, you're our first returning guest. Of all the big stars I talked to, from Formula One drivers, IndyCar drivers, NASCAR drivers, etc., I have to say, out of all of them, you are not only the most polite one, you answer the questions like an absolute professional, and it's just an absolute joy and an absolute honor every single time we get the chance to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
That's the Swedish way of acting. We're very polite. We try to be a polite people, polite towards our friends. So
great, yeah.
So I'm gonna let you continue with your life, and I want to thank you ever so much to you that you wanted to join Motorsport Idag podcast this afternoon.
Thank you so much. The honor is mine.